Picture a crowded movie palace in 1943. A newsreel crackles, swing music blares, and somewhere in the balcony a young sailor on leave is falling in love with the silver screen. Fast forward to 2025, that sailor might be gone, but half a dozen of the faces he worshipped are somehow still taking curtain calls. They were born when radios were the size of refrigerators, yet they now share trending hashtags with influencers a fraction of their age. One of them tap danced on a rooftop before your grandparents were born and just collected another Emmy. Another won an Oscar in her very first film, then celebrated her 100th birthday beneath 4th of July fireworks. A third turned Nazi satire into box office gold, and at 98 walked on stage to grab a second Oscar he promises not to sell. A fourth spent 70 years smashing stereotypes until the Academy finally etched his name into Hollywood Boulevard. The oldest of our legends combed the Andes for instruments no one had ever heard outside village festivals. Now she curates playlists for streaming services. And the quietest of them all fled the spotlight at 28, only to see her noir masterpiece score a perfect rating 7 decades later. 6 names, 6 lifetimes that stretch from trench-coated Bogart to viral TikTok duets. Tonight, you'll hear how they kept the lights burning long after most marquees went dark, and why their stories may be the best anti-aging secrets on Earth.
Long before going viral meant anything, Dick Van Dyke was already a one-man epidemic of joy. When Broadway first spotted him in Bye Bye Birdie, he moved like a rubber-limbed scarecrow who'd swallowed pure sunshine. Television grabbed him next, and the Dick Van Dyke Show turned his spontaneous pratfalls into Monday morning playground legends. Ask any boomer about the over-the-ottoman tumble in the opening credits and watch their hips twitch from muscle memory. Yet the real miracle isn't what he did at 36, it's what he's still doing at 99. On mornings when most retirees weigh which pillbox to open, Van Dyke straps into a gym harness and brags about 3 weekly workouts. Last year, daytime TV audiences gasped as he popped up in Days of Our Lives, flirted with a nurse, then strolled away with a daytime Emmy, making him the oldest winner in the award's history. Reporters asked for his secret. He grinned, leg lifts, laughter, and marrying a woman half my age who refuses to slow down. That same wife, Arlene, later confessed the flip side. Watching friends fall away can feel like a longevity curse. But Van Dyke shrugs off the sorrow by planning his next gig. Rumor says a streaming comedy wants him to play the mischievous granddad who lives in the attic. Of course, the accent from Mary Poppins still trails him like chimney soot. He laughs louder at the joke than anyone, proof that humility may be the best fountain of youth. "I've been blessed," he told a crowd, "but I also put in the push-ups." Keep that in mind as we meet our next centenarian, a woman who survived Marlon Brando's smolder and walked away with the gold.
When Eva Marie Saint entered Stage 8 at Columbia in 1954, the cameras were set for On the Waterfront. She was 29, terrified, and standing opposite Marlon Brando, the most unpredictable force in cinema. Director Elia Kazan weaponized that fear. He whispered, "Don't let him through that doorway no matter what." Brando teased, prowled, improvised, but Saint held the line. The raw electricity that crackles on screen earned her an Academy Award the first time she ever faced a film crowd. She might have stayed the earnest girl next door, but Alfred Hitchcock had other plans. For North by Northwest, he marched her through Manhattan boutiques, lowered her voice 3 octaves, and told her to look Cary Grant straight in the eye. Men will faint. Overnight, she transformed into an ice-cool spy who could melt stone with a single side glance. That dual identity, vulnerability and steel, became her hallmark for the next 70 years. On July 4th, 2024, fireworks spelled out her 100th birthday. She toasted with great-grandkids, then recorded a podcast reminding young actors that listening is 90% of acting. A lifetime marriage to director Jeffrey Hayden, 6 carefully chosen decades of roles, and voluntary retreats from fame kept her sane while the world spun faster. She still believes the best direction she ever received was Kazan's whispered dare on that first set: feel everything for real. Up next, a man who's felt everything and turned every feeling into a punchline.
Melvin Kaminsky grew up dodging stickball bats in Brooklyn alleys, but inside his head, he heard drum rolls. By 25, he was crammed into the smokiest writer's room television has ever seen, Your Show of Shows, firing jokes at a pace that typists couldn't match. Nights he unwound by riffing with buddy Carl Reiner. Brooks played a bewildered sage who claimed to be 2,000 years old. The shtick sold 1 million comedy albums, feeding him when regular gigs didn't. Then came a notion so outrageous, even his friends cringed. What if a crooked Broadway producer financed a musical titled Springtime for Hitler? The producers grabbed an Oscar for screenplay, a Tony decades later, and a permanent home on college dorm posters. Brooks topped himself in 1974 by releasing Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein in the same year, detonating Hollywood's box office with a two-pronged laugh bomb. But the kid from Brooklyn wasn't all shtick. Under the Brooks Films banner, he nurtured serious masterpieces like The Elephant Man and The Fly, quietly omitting his own name so audiences wouldn't expect a pie fight. That self-awareness carried him right into the 2024 Governor's Awards, where at 97, he clutched an honorary Oscar and joked, "I promise not to sell this one, yet." The standing ovation roared long enough to make even a professional ham blush. His memoir hit shelves in 2021, his spoof series History of the World Part 2 streamed in 2023, and his daily goal remains unchanged: one good laugh, mine or yours, before bedtime. Speaking of boundary breakers, meet the man who kicked open every casting door Hollywood tried to bolt shut.
James Hong once calibrated traffic signals for the Los Angeles County Engineer's office. By night, he mimicked Clark Gable for Friends until belly laughter echoed down the halls. Engineering paid bills, but make-believe fed his soul. In 1953, he bolted into show business, only to find the gates chained. Asian characters were still slathered in grease paint on white faces, so Hong co-founded East West Players, America's first Asian-American theater. Within a decade, 7 of 10 working AAPI actors had passed through its doors. Hollywood followed slowly, bit roles beside John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, and even a gig opposite a young Jerry Seinfeld in The Chinese Restaurant episode. Then came 1982's Blade Runner. Hong built the replicant's eyes and stole the scene with a single shiver. In Big Trouble in Little China, he morphed into Lo Pan, the ghost emperor who made cult audiences cheer the villain. Animated studios loved the voice that could flip from silk to steel. He became Poe's Goosefather in Kung Fu Panda and an uptight advisor in Mulan. Age failed to dim his range. At 93, he joined the multiverse mania of Everything Everywhere All at Once, sharing a SAG award with co-stars half his age. 4 months later, Lion Dancers escorted him to unveil the 2,723rd star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He is the oldest person ever to receive one. Cameras flashed, Jamie Lee Curtis hugged him, and he bowed with the same humility that kept him hustling through 7 decades of stereotype busting. Hong still mentors younger talent, reminding them, if the door sticks, take it off its hinges. Which brings us to a woman who built her own musical doors out of bamboo, clay flutes, and Andean panpipes.
If music had a passport, Elisabeth Waldo stamped it first. Born on a Yakima reservation in 1918, she sang by 3, bowed a violin by 5, and won a scholarship to the Curtis Institute thanks to Jascha Heifetz. The All-American Youth Orchestra whisked her across 2 continents in 1940. Every city gifted her a new melody, every market stall a handmade instrument. While her generation traded violins for rifles, Waldo stuffed suitcases with ocarinas, charangos, and drums carved from armadillo shells. Hollywood found her exotic and plopped her and her fiddle into 1945's Song of Mexico. Yet Waldo never chased stardom. Guided by muralist Diego Rivera, she began transcribing ancient rituals into modern notation, music that had never touched sheet paper. By 1959, she was layering pan-Andean flutes over jazz rhythms on Realm of the Incas, decades before World Beat had a marketing section. The experiments never stopped. She scored Mexican westerns in the 70s, toured China with a Pan-Asian ensemble in the 80s, and erected a 150-seat theater at her own cultural ranch in California so local kids could hear the planet's forgotten songs. In her late 90s, she penned Concierto Indo-Americano for a Xi'an orchestra, proving curiosity needn't respect age. Now, 106, she still tweaks arrangements from a sunlit studio lined with more instruments than most museums display. Sound, she says, is wood and breath and hope. Why would I ever retire from hope? Our final legend shared that philosophy, though Hollywood called her back only long enough to make one perfect thriller.
Jacqueline White's Hollywood career could fit on a cocktail napkin, but what a toast it raises. A casting director spotted her during a UCLA stage exercise in 1942. MGM signed the bright 19-year-old, then mostly ignored her.
3 years later, she jumped to RKO, and everything sharpened. She traded breezy comedies for sweat-soaked dramas like Crossfire, one of the first American films to tackle anti-Semitism. Her crown jewel landed almost by accident. After marrying rancher Bruce Anderson and moving to Wyoming, White returned to Los Angeles for a visit and bumped into director Richard Fleischer in the studio cafeteria. He needed a quick replacement for The Narrow Margin, a shoestring noir set almost entirely on a hurtling train. White said yes. Finished prints were shelved when new owner Howard Hughes debated reshoots. 2 years later, he relented and released the original cut. Critics hailed its taut perfection, praising White's poised strength opposite grizzled detective Charles McGraw. She never made another movie. Instead, she raised 5 children, nursed horses, and occasionally flew to film festivals where wide-eyed cinephiles discovered she was astonishingly alive. On November 27, 2024, she turned 102. Her secret? "I left before the party got loud," she jokes. Yet the echo of her brief, brilliant run keeps attracting viewers who want to feel that locomotive suspense for the first time.
What binds a rubber-limbed comic, a Hitchcock blonde, a Borscht Belt anarchist, a Chinese-American shapeshifter, an ethnomusicologist, and a noir ingenue? Start with motion. Van Dyke still lunges across living room rugs. Brooks still roams writers' rooms hunting for the next punchline. Hung collects new accents like postcards. Waldo's fingers chase impossible scales. Saint volunteers dramatic readings. White, even in quiet Wyoming winters, never missed her daily walk along the river bend. Where muscles stagnate, spirit follows. Second, reinvention. Each time the industry tried to box them, they redrew the box. Hitchcock redressed Saint, Brooks moved from shtick to serious producing, Hung flipped from villain to noodle shop dad. Waldo remixed centuries, White traded camera flashes for cattle drives, and happiness. Finally, generosity. East-West Players, Waldo's Cultural Center, Brooks Scholarships, Van Dyke's charity telethons, Saint's workshops for student filmmakers, all 6 understood that legacy is strongest when shared.
They laughed with Chaplin's fans and trended beside Charli D'Amelio. They premiered on black and white newsreels and now beam onto 8K OLEDs. More importantly, they kept doing the work every day, long after applause became background noise. That is why the century didn't break them. So ask yourself, if Dick can hammer out leg lifts at 99, if Eva can hit 100 and still critique a scene, if Mel can win an Oscar he won't pawn this time, if James can score his biggest role at 93, if Elisabeth can compose at 106, and if Jacqueline can step out of obscurity to find her film revered, what tiny dream have you shelved because you think it's too late? Dust it off. Leave a comment on which legend sparked you most, and tell us what you're picking back up tomorrow. Then hit subscribe, because in our next deep dive, we're unsealing the secret scandals the studios paid millions to bury, stories even these centenarians never dared to whisper. Until then, keep moving, keep laughing, keep curious. The projector's light may dim, but the reel goes on.